Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh my goodness, do we have a great show for you. I'm telling you. Listen, here we are. We live in this world where we are so connected, and, we've come out of this pandemic, and maybe we're still partially in it, but, here we are in this world of remote work. And we're doing more Zoom meetings than we've ever done, because even during the pandemic, that's what we were doing, right? But then, after the pandemic was over, we started having these hybrid things where, we're working from home more and people can live everywhere, and we're connected through Zoom meetings and everything like that. But you know what? Here's the problem, right? We're lost. And you go, what? Jay, we're lost. Listen, it's just not the same environment being online versus being face-to-face with someone. And here's the thing. My guest, Dr. Diane Lennard, has co-written this great book with Dr. Amy Mennick, Humanizing the Remote Experience Through Leadership and Coaching, Strategies for Better Virtual Connections. Let me tell you, before you decide to turn away, I just want to tell you something. This book is for everybody, because this book is more than just a book on remote learning and humanizing the remote space. This book is about any relationship and how we interact in those relationships, right? This book is going to help you improve your relationships personally. It's going to help you in your relationships professionally, face-to-face or online. I'm just telling you, so if you're a CEO of a company, you really need to read this book. If you're an owner of a company and you have people, you need to read this book. If you're an employee of any one of those companies, you need to read this book. If you are just human and breathing, you need to read this book, okay? That's the truth of the matter. This book is outstanding. It is great. It has blown me away, and I have loved every second of it. And Dr. Diane is going to be with us in just a second, but it's going to be awesome. So, get going, get online, tell your friends you're going to want to watch the show, because this is going to be a great show for you. And you're going to want to listen to the show, because the show is going to be great for those of you who are going to listen to podcasts. But before we get started with her, let's do what we do every week, right? We're 4-part people: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people, right? And what's interesting to me is Dr. Diane and Dr. Amy what they have done is they've included a couple of other areas that we need to take a look at, right? We need to kind of take a look at our relational aspect. We need to take a look at our purpose. I totally agree with those things, but we're going to focus on the 4, right? The physical, the mental, the emotional, spiritual. And here's what I want you to do. What I want you to do is I want you to evaluate yourself from a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being my physical, 10 being my physical is awesome. And by the way, the number that you give yourself right now doesn't matter. It's a starting place for you to grow from, because we have a growth mindset on this show. And our growth mindset is, we believe that people can change, right? We're not in a fixed mindset where people can't change. No, we believe that people can change, right? And so you can change. So physically, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you were to evaluate yourself, say getting enough sleep, which by the way is really important, drinking enough water, that's hydration, that's really important. Exercise, right, which is really important to this book as well. If you were to evaluate yourself, eating right, what are you putting into your body? What would you give yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? Okay, that's your first number. The second number is what we call the mental, or the cognitive, or I think we could just focus in on learning, because we need to be learning something new all the time. And by the way, you can't be a couch potato and let things come at you and think that you're learning. You have to be an active participant in that learning. Matter of fact, what Dr. Diane and Dr. Amy talk about in the book is, working with your hands, right, creates amazing things in your body that can change you. But you've got to be learning something. And you've got 2 halves of the brain. You got a right half that's more, the emotional, more creative. You got the left half, which is more, logical, right? Numbers, right? And so we need to be doing things, even though we have this corpus callosum that connects the 2. We need to do things to engage that, right? So how are you doing in your learning on a scale of 1 to 10? Right? That's your second number. Third number is the emotional number. And you know what? Daniel Goleman has written tons on the emotional quotient and on how our emotions are affected. And actually, you're going to find that Dr. Lennard and Dr. Mennick talk about that as well, that your emotions play a role, and the amygdala plays the role in your emotions. But the truth of the matter is, we boil it down to 2 things. 1, how well are you able to control your emotions under stress and pressure, which you can, because it's a choice. And then 2, how well are you able to tap into and understand the emotions of others, truly actively listening? So a scale of 1 to 10, how would you evaluate yourself there? And then finally, the fourth area is the spiritual area, right? And, you know, that area is a little bit difficult sometimes for us to wrap our minds around. But the truth of the matter is, if you're to eliminate the physical, the mental, and the emotional, what you have left is you have what's going on inside of you, right? What is really going on? What gives you centeredness? What gives you a sense of peace? What gives you a sense of control in the midst of chaos? What do you lean on? Whatever that is, that becomes what we might call a God, right? Our higher power, right? And then you have to ask yourself, is that really working for you? Whether it be God or meditation or whatever it may be, is it ultimately working for you, right? And changing you so that you can experience that joy and peace in the midst of chaos? And what are you going to do to change it? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say that's going? Those 4 areas are like the air in the tires of your car, right? You want the air in the tires of your car to be at the right levels, because what happens if it's not? It leans one way to the other. The car doesn't work as efficiently or as effectively. And by the way, if they're all too low, you can ruin the car, right? We want to bring those up to the right height and to the right level. And speaking of someone who does that, her name is Dr. Diane Lennard. She is Clinical Associate Professor of Management Communications at the Stern School of Business at NYU, New York University. Dr. Lennard serves as Faculty Development Consultant for Stern Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning, and she has received the Distinguished Teaching Award in recognition of excellence in teaching innovation. She is the founder of Lennard and Company, an international consulting firm, and specializing in theater-based experiential learning programs for leadership and professional development. She coaches executives, educators, business consultants, and other professionals who want to expand their communication skills and abilities for functioning diverse work settings. She's the author of 3 books, with her latest effort co-authored with Dr. Amy Mennick, Humanizing the Remote Experience Through Leadership and Coaching. I'm telling you, they're all very good. And they're absolutely fantastic. So this is the first time she joins us on A New Direction. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Diane Lennard. And Dr. Diane, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. All right, well, let's dig right in to this book, because there's a lot, and there's no way we're going to get through it in our time. So right away, you discuss the paradox we have created in the introduction. So help us understand, what is the paradox we've created?
It's almost an irony. The more digitally connected we are, we can sometimes feel less human connection. And we are social creatures, and we do need to feel connected to other people. So how is that possible? That digitally we have more access, we're more efficient, where it's convenient, and yet we can feel disconnected. And that's the paradox we wanted to explore, because there's no question there are benefits to the digital world, but there are also some real serious human costs that need to be looked at. And I agree completely with you. It's not just COVID. Now we're in a continually virtual world, and interacting in that is a different experience that we need to think about. How is it affecting us, and how can we improve it?
Right. And part of this is that you and I talked about this before the show, that we're kind of in denial that there's anything really different, or we believe on one part that we're actually doing better in remote spaces than face to face. But we are in denial, aren't we?
Yes, we are, because the fact is the brain is wired by nature for being with other people. So if you think about evolution, we needed other people to feel safe. That was a basic human need. And even though there are other people on the screen, our brain doesn't see it that way. Our brain knows that we're alone looking at images in a box. They know that we're literally alone. So our body and our brains react to that. So that's the starting point. The fact is, when we're on Zoom, we're alone. And there are basic human needs such as safety. That's our number one priority. If we're not safe, it's very hard to focus on understanding and focus on connecting with other people because there's a threat. So that's number one, is safety. It's just not the same. Again, there are benefits, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I think what people miss uh, in not understanding what's actually happening inside their body, and it's, it's particularly the brain, but inside the body, because our body's connected to the brain, so everything is changing. But what's happening is that we're not really paying attention to how disconnected we are.
Yes.
Because when we're talking to each other, if you and I are in the same room, when we're talking to each other, it's a three-dimensional
Exactly.
being. And now we're no longer three-dimensional. And so I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but we're missing signals, aren't we?
We're missing many signals. We're missing touch. We're missing movement. We're missing smells. We're missing all kinds of things. The audio is different. The visual is different. If I'm looking at my camera, it appears that I'm looking at you. But if I'm looking at you, it looks like I'm looking away. So eye-to-eye contact is extremely important in interpersonal relations. In terms of that immediate feeling when you get on remote, someone I know, when the pandemic hit, she would cry a lot, and she didn't understand what was happening when people were on the screen. But then she realized that it was very hard to feel the same interpersonal connection with people, and that was causing her, that awareness was disturbing to her. And then the more she understood it, the more she could manage it.
And I know that's going to be key for us. Awareness of what's happening is going to be key for us when we're trying to combat what's happening in our remote workspaces and digital workspaces now. I do find it interesting that you're so correct on this. We want to have eye contact, but I cannot have eye contact with you unless I'm looking directly at this camera in front of me, right? But the truth of the matter is, I want to look at you.
Exactly.
Because I want to be connected to you. But you're looking at your camera. And so when you're looking at your camera and I'm looking at you, if you should happen to glance at me, I'm not looking at you because I'm looking at you and you're looking at the camera. And then when I look at the camera, you may look at me and you're going, but you're not looking at me. But I am. And it really confuses the brain.
It does confuse the brain. And there's actually scientific research on what happens when people look directly at each other. First of all, you can understand the other person's intent better. There's things in the brain that help us understand when there's eye-to-eye contact. There's also brain-to-brain synchrony when you look at each other, and these things are just missing. I teach communication and I teach people how to present on remote. And I tell them, you need to look at the camera, but please move the people right underneath the camera so that you can see them too. And there's another thing that I find funny. My students basically look at themselves.
Oh, yeah, right.
And so one of the first things I say in the very first class is turn on hide self-view. Because when you communicate with other people, you don't look at yourself, you look at the other person. Right. So it's like talking into a mirror. So immediately there's a disconnect. And people are fascinated by watching themselves. They look at their hair and they look at their facial expression. And research actually shows that when you do that, you are disconnecting from the other person.
You have to, because now you're trying to connect with yourself.
Exactly.
Right. So as soon as you start looking at yourself, going, what do I look like? Do I look weird? And I don't even know.
Self-conscious too.
Right. We'd start developing this self-consciousness, which we would never do in a face-to-face conversation because nobody's holding up a mirror on their chest, right? Of you. We're talking, right? And we're not doing that. And what happens is we get so fascinated by I'm on camera. right? It's a very bizarre thing that happens in Zoom meetings. And if you have a lot of people, and I have found this even with myself, I'm on a Zoom meeting with a ton of other people. Who am I looking for in that ton of other people? If I got 50 people on the screen, who am I looking for? I'm looking for me. I'm not even paying attention to the other 49 people.
You might want to do hide self-view.
Right. No, I know. I get it. Yeah, I know. But that is our tendency. Our tendency is to go, where am I? Where am I on the
locate yourself in space. And that's
Yes.
the point. We have two-dimensional space. So one of the things I used to enjoy is when people would walk in a room, you get a lot of information by seeing entrances and exits and where people choose to sit and how they use the space. We have no spatial cues.
Right.
We can't do a sideways glance at a friend, or we can't laugh at a joke with a friend because it's disruptive.
Right. It is. It's so disruptive. And there's so many other disruptors when we're in remote space. And I know you and Dr. Amy talk about this, but like I'm sitting here in my studio, right? And I have a big screen in front of me, and I got my camera, and then I have two laptops, and I have a soundboard here, right? And then I've got lights coming in at me, right? And I'm here trying to pay attention to everything that's going on. Right. Now, that's a lot of distraction.
A lot. So attention becomes a major issue.
Right.
And in the process of writing this book, I learned a lot about how complex it is to pay attention. In fact, there are 6 processes. There are 2 processes just to prepare to pay attention before you're even paying attention. So those 2 are orienting. And I know the first moment that I have 49 people come on the screen, it's rather disorienting.
Yes, it is.
It takes a moment for me to go, I can't say hello to each person. I can't recognize them. And that I find very disorienting. So that takes some preparation, and then orienting towards, okay, I'm sitting in this chair and I'm going to be here for 3 hours. Where's my tea? How am I going to spill things? Where's the time, the clock? That's cognitive overload for me because there's a lot of things to manage. Can they see my screen? Am I sharing? How is my sound? A lot of things I'm not thinking about at all when I walk into a room. I'm thinking about people.
Right.
And so these are little things, but we're talking about humanizing. And the interesting thing about humanizing is we are programmed for in-person interaction. We are hardwired to be social. So now we're in a 2D environment. Our brains were not developed for a 2D environment. My guess is they're going to develop over time and adapt to it, but that's not what we're used to.
We're not used to it, and it's unnatural.
Correct.
For us. And you talked about the 2 preparatory processes. The first being orienting, that we have to orient to our environment. But there's another other preparatory process is alerting, which we don't pay attention to these things, by the way. But these are things that we just automatically do. Listeners, you're out there. These are things that we are automatically doing. We're not. You're not really necessarily all that consciously aware of it. But alerting, right, is kind of this thing that are we ready to respond and receive sensory information?
So we use in the book an example that I think is helpful, which is you're sitting at a cocktail party or a party, and someone sits next to you. They're next to you, but you're not really paying attention to them. When they start talking to you, you have to change your focus and be alert to them. And so there are lots of other conversations happening in the room that you're not paying attention to, but you're aware that they're happening. Mm-hmm. So orienting is knowing where you are in the space, and alerting is, okay, I'm going to now pay attention to this.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And then this whole idea of multitasking when you're on remote,
Oh,
there
oh,
is no such thing as multitasking,
right.
because it's really what's technically called switching.
Mhm.
You switch from your phone to your computer to the room to the sound to something else, but you go back and forth. Every time you switch, you lose some focus and
Mm.
you lose time. And
Mm.
it's technically called a switching cost,
Mm.
because it takes away from something. And so prioritizing what you want to pay attention to is one process. Ignoring, because you can't pay attention to all the stimuli, it's impossible. And then you have to ideally sustain your attention so that you can really engage with something and accomplish something. And that takes a lot of brain power. You have to feel safe in order to do that. Because if you don't feel safe, all your attention is going on protecting yourself.
Mm.
And
Beautiful.
so safety and attention are very closely aligned.
Mm. They sure are. Her name is Dr. Diane Lennard. She co-authored this book, Humanizing the Remote Experience Through Leadership and Coaching Strategies for Better Virtual Connections. It's a fantastic book. We're just getting started. And don't you love her already? Of course you do. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. Folks, Epic Physical Therapy, whether you're recovering from an injury or surgery, suffering everyday aches and pains, having difficulty performing activities of daily living, listen, it doesn't matter. They will design a customized treatment program for you. When you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, and epic results, go to epicpt.com. They're my therapists. They should be yours too. It's epicpt.com, EPICPT.com. Linda Craft, a team realtors for more than 38 years. They have been helping the world transition. And you go, whoa, I thought they were a real estate company. They are. But think about it. Every place that you have ever lived has been a transition in life. And that's what their purpose is to help to make that life transition smooth and easy. And they've been doing it for 38 years plus. So listen, when you're ready for your next transition, whether that's selling your home or buying your home, talk to the transition experts. Talk to Linda Craft Team Realtors. That's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Dr. Diane Lennard and her co-authored book with Dr. Amy Mennick, Humanizing the Remote Experience Through Leadership and Coaching. And we have just gotten started. And I don't want to leave this topic too soon, because there is something that you say in this book, because you did talk about safety. But here's the thing. We talk about safety and alertness and orienting. But here, the thing that is interesting is that we can feel alone even though other people are on the screen. This is what you said, on the screen, which can cause levels of stress, which, by the way, for those people who want to get into the nitty-gritty, it releases the hormone norepinephrine, which causes it to rise. And then you say the feeling of being separated from others can cause the brain to respond as if it were in actual physical pain.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yes. And what's important to know is we are by nature, I think you said it, it's natural to be social.
Mm.
So the aloneness, where is the protection going to come from? We need to belong. We need to, when we were in caves and hunting, someone stayed in the cave to keep the children safe, let's say. And we need one another to protect to protect ourselves. And when we don't have that, there's this thing called fight or flight, which it's fine to have that for a moment. But when you have that over a prolonged period of time and it gets excessive, that stress, it really takes a toll on you. So stress is a good thing if it moves you into action, but not if it's prolonged and over time. And I do believe that some people experience that stress by being remote for a long period of time during the day, or for being alone in their interactions.
Mm. You know, this whole thing about the remote experience, and we don't think about it this way. You did briefly mention it, is that our brain becomes vulnerable to overload. And because our brain in the remote environment, I mean, even though you and I are, we're hundreds of miles away, but we're in a remote environment here, right? Our brains, unbeknownst to us, are working really, really hard to make sense of this environment and what we're doing. And listen, I do this every week, so I'm getting more and more used to it. But I know that when I am done after an hour of doing a show, I'm exhausted.
Yes, yes. So our brains are so fascinating in that they have shortcuts. And one of the brain's shortcuts is to make predictions, to guess what someone might be meaning or might be intending. But we can't really do that completely when people are remote, because there's so many there's so much missing information. So for instance, when, let's say, somebody's camera goes off, we can interpret that they're gone, they don't like me, they're disinterested. We could be completely wrong in our prediction, and then our brains have to go back and fix that prediction error, and it's exhausting. It's extra work to make sense of this new environment. So it can be mentally taxing. Plus, am I going to spill the water that's here, and are the lights on, and what's the noise outside, and all of that, all of those are more things to deal with cognitively in our heads, and we can only deal with a limited number of things.
Yeah. I don't want to get too bogged down in this, and I told you I didn't want to do that at the beginning of the show, and I'm not going to, but I feel like people need to be aware that there's a whole bunch of chemicals that are happening in your brain during this process. And one of the things that we briefly talked about was eye contact and the difficulty that we have in these remote environments dealing with eye contact. But when we are actually in physical contact with each other, because it doesn't appear to happen in remote situations, there's a surge of oxytocin, which is a neurotransmitter that really helps moderate our emotions, especially in the area in the inner brain called the amygdala. And that doesn't happen because we see that there's a whole bunch of hormones that just basically get shut down. Endorphins, dopamine, which is our happy drug basically inside our brain. It's affecting neurochemicals that we are completely unaware of, that for whatever reason we feel like is not a problem, but it's a problem, isn't it?
There's a reason that people get exhausted. For a while everyone I knew was talking about Zoom fatigue, because it was a phenomenon. Why is this happening? It's happening physically and mentally. And so, but the good news is there really are ways to deal with that, with that exhaustion. But being unaware of it is not in anyone's best interest.
And I want to talk about the chronic exhaustion, because both of you bring up in the book the difficulties that can happen with prolonged and excessive stress in these environments can actually build up to burnout is the subtitle of the chapter. And this is my fear for people who are listening to the show and people who are in remote environments, is this issue of burnout. Because I feel like, we hear words like quiet quitting and people ghosting their jobs, but I also wonder how much of that we can attribute to the fact that they're just really burned out and they don't realize it.
Yes. And burnout is not just I'm tired. Burnout is a diagnosed phenomenon. It's a workplace phenomenon, and it has 3 very specific symptoms. Would you like me to mention what those are?
Yeah, I would love to do that. Before we do that, I have the definition here. Can I read that for everybody?
Sure,
That
sure.
definition. So the human burnout, right, which ran rampant starting in 2019, has an official classification in the International Classification of Diseases. International Classification of Diseases, right? Burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as a result from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by 3 dimensions, which he's going to talk about: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to the job, and reduced professional efficacy. Okay, first of all, Dr. Diane, it's classified as a disease.
Yes, it's happening all over. I think when people realize what's going on, they do start managing it because it's very extreme. So here's what happens. You get exhausted, but I'm talking about mentally exhausted and physically exhausted. It's not just tired. We're talking about zapped, drained. There's nothing left. And when that happens, the stress is very severe. There's a wonderfully simple strategy that you can do to not work 24/7 because it's so convenient. And I can work a lot. So this strategy is very helpful. It's called end of workday ritual.
Mm.
And you literally do a couple of actions like shut down your computer, change your clothes, whatever it is, and you do them at the same time and you tell yourself, I'm done for the day. But then you must be done. There are things that help shut down, like making a to-do list, reviewing what you've done for the day. But you need to tell your brain, you can stop working now and you can rest.
Mm.
So that's a strategy, and we can talk about more strategies. But I just want people to know that you can deal with that exhaustion by managing your energy. So that's the first symptom. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to do something that you wrote in the book here, because I want to ask the listeners these questions that you and Dr. Amy wrote in this book, because they're really good questions. I gave them to my wife, and my wife went, "Oh my gosh, I'm exhausted." So here's some of the questions, because I asked her everyone, and she said, "Oh my gosh, yes, yes, yes." Do you feel tired when you wake up and have to face another workday? Do you sometimes find it hard to think straight? Do you feel you have little emotional energy left at the end of a workday? Do you feel like you reach your endpoint before your obligations are completed? Are you too tired to do things you enjoy after work? Do you spend a great deal of time worrying? Do you have trouble sleeping at night? Folks, if you're answering yes to these questions, you're exhausted. You're exhausted. And that's only the first part of the 3. There's detachment, and I'm going to let Dr. Diane talk about detachment.
Okay. So detachment is exhaustion is a reaction to prolonged and excessive stress. Detachment is a way of coping with it. Mm. And so when people are detached, they don't care about work. They don't care about their colleagues. They just check out, basically. And that's a dreadful thing, because we want to feel engaged in what we're doing. So sure. Detachment, it's almost a cynicism, like I don't care. And, it's a defense mechanism, basically. So that's the second syndrome. And a lot of people can relate to that. The third one, some people, it takes them a little longer to recognize. And that is a self-judgment. And it's called a feeling of inefficacy. In other words, I'm not really doing my job well. I can't get anything done. And these are highly competent people who are very good at what they do, but they're feeling that about themselves because they're exhausted and they're detached and they're burned out, basically. So the three symptoms are exhaustion, detachment, and a feeling of inefficacy.
Let's talk about inefficacy for a second here, because I don't think anybody has a problem with the first 2 that works remotely. But where I see pushback from people is this inefficacy part, because people will say to me, "Oh, I'm far more productive now that I am, doing remote work." And matter of fact, they should be happy because I'm working more hours than I was if I would be at the job. And I read this pushback. I was just on LinkedIn, and which, by the way, you can find both Dr. Diane Lennard and myself on LinkedIn, by the way. But these people were saying, "Oh, you know what? We're far more productive than I ever was in the office. I'm like going, whoa. That really can't be true. If you're working 15 hours of a 24-hour day and you're feeling like you're more productive, are you really?"
And, some people can maybe get more quantity done, but it's certainly not quality. And the thing about this feeling of inefficacy, it's a little complex because it's a change in the way you view your own performance. Like, I'm not doing a good job. It may not be true at all, but it's a sense of I'm not performing up to par. And no one else may see it, but that's part of the burnout feeling.
Well, and this is where I feel like we're not paying enough attention to the statistics of quiet quitting and ghosting. We're blaming people because, oh, they're just doing that. But I don't think we're looking at these three symptoms that are happening, of exhaustion, detachment and inefficacy. I don't think we're attributing enough to the idea. Have you ever considered that maybe they're doing it because, quite frankly, in these remote environments, they're just burned out, and they burn out quickly?
So there is a responsibility both on the individual's part, but also on the employer's part. Are you asking for unreasonable things? Are you asking people to respond to you at 9:00 at night because they can? Are you treating them unfairly? There are things that employers can do, and there are also things individuals can do for themselves, like managing their own energy skillfully and sleeping and things like that. So it happens a lot, and we need to address it. And there are warning signs. When you get exhausted and you're starting to detach and you don't feel good about yourself, there are things you need to do to avoid burnout before it really settles in, because it can be extreme.
You quote a stat here, and it's from in the United States for Management of the Workplace. You talk about workplace stress contributes to more than 120,000 deaths per year, and 5 to 8% of annual health costs by some estimates. I had no idea. That this was even that we were looking at those kind of numbers.
It's the reason it's diagnosed, and it's in the science book DMV, which I'm sure you know about.
Oh yeah.
Is because it's rampant.
Yeah, I had, when I saw that statistic, I literally had to stop reading.
And I do think the benefits of being remote, the access, the efficiency, and the convenience contribute to overworking. There's a syndrome called because I can. And I do it because I can. And I'm going to go on my computer because it's 2 steps from my bed. And it's very easy for me to get to. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why people can work forever.
We're so good at rationalizing, aren't we?
Yes.
We're so good at rationalizing.
Yes.
All right, let's start at chapter 4, and we'll take a break here and after we introduce it. Wellness matters. Wellness is a whole self-health. And you talk about 6 areas of connecting and thriving is this section, by the way. Physical, emotional, which everybody's heard on the show. Cognitive, which you've heard on the show. And then occupational health, social health, and spiritual health. These 6 areas are critical, aren't they?
Yes, and I enjoyed listening to your opening because I had a little baby epiphany
Mm.
otherwise known as an epiphanet, or whatever you want to call it. And it was that the two that you didn't mention were social. And that's what the whole book is about,
Right.
that we're social beings and we're humans. Remember that we're humans. So that's almost like an umbrella. And then the occupational comes in because burnout is an occupational experience. So burnout happens at work.
Mm.
It's work related.
Yeah.
It's not just I'm burnt out of, washing the dishes or vacuuming or, having to shop all the time.
Right,
It's
right.
a workplace phenomenon. So what I realize is your four are the basic four. And then when we think about this, adding the social is the human and occupational is critical because we're working and learning online.
That's beautiful. Her name, and we're going to talk more about this because there's going to be secrets for you in these 6 areas that you're going to be able to do to combat your remote experience, which, by the way, you're listening to Dr. Diane Lennard, who co-wrote Humanizing the Remote Experience Through Leadership and Coaching, Strategies for Better Virtual Connections. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. All right, folks, listen, Epic Physical Therapy offers the most advanced top-of-the-line equipment like the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill, the Normatec compression sleeves, my favorite, the Game Ready. They are trained and certified in the most comprehensive cutting-edge strategies like blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, coupling. That's just a few. Listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, your epic results, don't look any further. Go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, listen, 38 years helping people transition in their life. Every place you've ever moved has been a life transition. They want to help you do it no matter where you live in the world. Start with Linda Craft Team Realtors. I promise they can help you. Go to lindacraft.com. It's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend, Dr. Diane Lennard. I can call you friend, can't I?
Yes, I feel that.
Humanizing the Road Experience Through Leadership and Coaching, Strategies for Better Virtual Connections, co-written with Dr. Amy Mennick. Absolutely fabulous book. Find it in a bookstore near you. Order it on Amazon. It's absolutely brilliantly written, and it's just so well done. All right, so let's start talking about these 6 areas because there's some strategies here. If we understand, I know that I do my 4 on the show, but there's some strategies here that actually can help us in rehumanizing or humanizing our remote environments, but also really more so decreasing our stress, correct?
Yes. And because stress is physical and mental, there are different strategies that focus on the body and different ones that focus on the mind. And there's a whole range of them. So you can pick one that's easy. You can do all of them. But the body strategies, one of the most useful is actually breathing. Something that we do without thinking about it. But doing it consciously affects our nervous system. It calms you down. The big question I get from all my students is about the anxiety they feel when they have to do public speaking. And they say, how am I going to manage the nerves? Well, breathing is really helpful. It immediately calms you down. One deep breath calms you down. So there's a whole range of breathing exercises. Again, the basics, which is 8 hours of sleep. You may be familiar, there's a fantastic book called Why We Sleep. And it actually changed my life because I work a lot. So forcing myself to sleep 7 or 8 hours is a challenge. It takes work, but it's critically important to get that sleep because our body, you talked about air in the tires.
Yes.
And in the book, we talked about gas in the tank.
Yes.
So I thought we're using the same analogy here, but you need to fill up your body with good energy so that it can work for you. Because you can't connect with other people if you're drained and exhausted.
Right. You
Uh,
you also talk about getting physical, and I thought
yes,
that this was really
yes.
important.
So I'm going to use me as an example again, but I just got a dog for the first time, and I have to walk that dog 4 times a day, whether it's raining or snowing or cold. And just getting outside and breathing air and taking a break. I don't mind that it's 4 times a day because I need that break.
Mm.
It's very helpful. Just even walking around where you live.
Mm.
And there's research that shows walking in nature can be very helpful, or take a break and stretch, or do a run, or pick up weights, or there are lots of things you can do in 7 minutes physically.
Mm.
And you really need to fuel your body that way. Because without a strong body, we don't have the energy we need.
And so, which leads us into fuel, making healthy food choices, right?
Oh, so important. And paying attention to eating, what you're eating, when you're eating it. Yeah.
Mm.
All of that. Somebody called it the basics.
Right.
And it really is basic. Eat well, sleep well, drink well, take care of your physical body because it's our instrument. It's what carries us around. We need to.
Well, I want to get back to the sleep part because, recommended sleep, but there was one thing that you had a piece of research from NASA that just made me feel so much better about myself. And that is that napping can be good for your health. And I felt so good to know that astronauts performed better when they took a nap.
And there are corporations now that are setting up napping rooms.
Really?
Yes. Huffington is a very big sleep advocate, and she's advocating for people to set up sleep pods in corporations so people can take naps.
Yeah.
That's how important it is.
Well, and the research results were amazing from NASA. I mean, 34% improvement in task performance after a nap, 50% increased in overall alertness, which we started the show with.
Yes, yes.
Right? In 10 to 20-minute naps. I mean, I'm like, I am a big advocate as an adult of napping. I'm a huge one. All right.
So there's another thing I just want to say about sleep is that I always thought, well, I'm busy this week, I'll sleep this weekend.
Right.
It's a myth to think that you can make up sleep. You need it every day because if you lose it, your organs respond negatively.
There's another one that I don't want to overlook because I've had to deal with this with clients one-on-one, and that's being aware of light.
Yes. Yes. So there's a seasonal disorder when the sun goes down, and
seasonal affective disorder.
You can buy certain kind of lights. You can also limit your blue light, which is from your phone at night because it keeps you awake. So there are real things you can do physically to control the stress. And the thing about stress is, again, it's good to have a little, but not prolonged and excessive.
All right. So now let's talk about some of the mind-based strategies.
The mind-based.
Yeah.
One of the simple things to do is focusing. Some people call it meditation, but even if you just focus on a sound for a moment or focus on something in present time, it really helps you. It helps your whole system. So focusing is simple and you can do it on anything. You can focus on a sound, you can focus on a phrase, you can focus on your breath, and anyone can do it anytime. I'm a city person and I ride the subways. I always use it for focusing time.
Here's one of my favorites. Name your emotions. I thought this is so powerful.
Yeah. Yes. When you're feeling something, feeling is actually something in your physical body. Emotion. Wait, am I getting this right?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Emotion is the response to that feeling. So if you can name it, it's not controlling you, you're managing it. So the thing about control of stress is it's always going to be there because that's the way our bodies work. But we can control stress rather than stress controlling us. And that's the key.
Yeah. Naming your emotion is so powerful. And I say this to people all the time. Google up the different variations in emotions, right? Because some of us have like, oh, I'm sad, I'm happy,
Right.
and we think blue is just a color. And so we don't understand the subtlety of sadness could be blue. But if you could get all the labels of emotions,
Right. It's labels.
right? And you can label that emotion, it really does get you back in control of what you're feeling.
Yeah. It puts it outside of your body.
Right.
So you can think about it and you can be rational about it instead of overwhelmed and consumed by it.
Right.
It's a simple process, very similar to another strategy, which is called reframing,
Yep.
which is looking at the same thing from a different lens.
Right.
So a problem could be an opportunity. It's the old expression, make lemon out of lemonade. Was that it?
Make lemonade out of lemons. Yeah.
Yeah, I get those cliches wrong sometimes, but it's basically, here's another way of looking at the same exact thing. Instead of it being a terrible thing, you can reframe it much more positively. And even just to realize you can see things from multiple perspectives really opens the mind and is freeing. It releases stress. Writing things down, journaling is effective.
Yeah, it's
very
effective.
Yeah. And some people like it. You could just do it very briefly. So these are simple, not hard to implement strategies.
Yeah, the gratitude journaling is something I'm a big fan of. I started years ago. I'm a big fan of starting my day with gratitude because as you both have pointed out, that it's so easy for us to focus on the negative, so much difficult for us to focus on the positive aspects. And I like to start my day with 7 things that I'm grateful for, and it just sets my day.
Yes. It positions your brain to think positively. And if you think about one of the symptoms of burnout, which is detachment, if you're grateful, you're connected to your life. You're connected to other people. You feel good. You feel you're not detached. You're connected.
I don't know if I've got this one right, but I think I've got this. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Find your ikigai.
Ikigai. Yes, it's a Japanese concept about, you can simplify it and say, what is my passion?
Mm-hmm.
What do I love? What makes me want to get up in the morning? Mm-hmm. And there's a 3-part strategy where you look at what are you paid for? What do you work?
Here it is. It's what do you value?
Yes.
What does the world need? What are you good at? And what could you be paid for?
Yes. Thank you for that.
No, you're
No, I appreciate it. It's a real thing that they do in Japan. It's not very common here, but I think the concept of it is important because it's prioritizing the things that make you wake up in the morning. And that's what we want to feel. We want to feel positive and grateful rather than stressed.
Okay, we've got a couple minutes left, and we have done so much. Let's give a couple suggestions handling the remote environment that your top couple that you feel can really help people.
I'm a big fan of alternating activity and rest because there's the focus brain, which works really, really well for 90 minutes, but then that's it. Then it needs a break. And so every time you give it a break, otherwise known as downtime, you re-energize and you refuel yourself. And if you can be efficient at managing your energy, you'll get a lot more accomplished during the day. And you'll feel more engaged in everything you're doing. So I think that's really, really important. I also think that prioritizing what matters is well, that's a priority.
Right. We prioritizing what's important versus what's urgent.
Exactly. Exactly. So that you're using your energy efficiently. That's important when so much is going on with the remote world. And I also think because it can seem transactional, that we really want to prioritize people with empathy, trust, respect. And as a communication person, I'm very aware that we're missing some signals. So we need to be very explicit when we communicate remotely. In other words, some of the nonverbal is missing. So we need to use our verbal really well to make up for that. I feel strongly about that. And then also, I would say focusing on shared purpose, that we have a common goal, our values are common. Our organization is doing something for the world. Our team is doing something for the organization. Individuals are doing something for the team. The purpose, having purpose, motivates people and keeps them engaged. And I think we need to stay focused on people communicating effectively and purpose. And these things do help humanize the remote experience. It improves our experience.
That's beautiful. You know, we've been on an hour.
Well, you are my friend, and I do feel like I could talk to you forever.
I've enjoyed this so much.
Me too.
Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
I have a website called Lennard and Company, and Lennard is spelled unusually. It's spelled Lennard, Lennard, and company.com.
And I mispronounced it the whole time, calling it Lennard. And
that's okay. That there are members of my family who say Lennard, so I'm used to it. I say Lennard. It's potatoes.
Awesome. And you can find you on LinkedIn, of course, as well.
Yes.
That's awesome. I'm going to put her website up on the blog post that's associated with the show. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what? That's the show. You know what I say to you every week, right? You're in control of three things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency, right? You can take control of those at any time. It can be a difficult world, but those three things are always within your control. Take control of them. I'm going to be back next week with another great guest. That means another great book. It's going to be another great show. And as I say to you every week, and you know what that is? Everywhere, all over the world. Ciao, everybody.